Hey everyone, one of my subscribers sent me over to NBC's YouTube channel to check out their new TV show, which actually you can watch the teaser and the pilot right now on YouTube. I'll put a link in an annotation down below. It's actually quite interesting. Think Inception, but more real. I'm sure you've all had dreams which you were convinced actually happened. That's the premise of Awake. It's really cool. But what caught my eye was the poster for this show, and the neat effect they added to the guy in the middle. I thought it'd be pretty cool to create a tutorial around this effect. That's what we're going to do today. The effect itself is actually quite simple to execute, but I want to cover one side step first, and that's extracting your model from its background. This will allow you to place a new background or even additional objects behind the subject. As I'm sure you know, there are many selection methods in Photoshop, and you're free to use any that you wish, but for this example, I think the quick selection tool, which you can find in your tools bar, should do the trick. This tool works by brushing over top of the area that you want to select. Similar to the magic wand tool, Photoshop will analyze the surrounding areas and include similar portions of your image. Now, we're not too concerned about a perfect selection at this point. If you're dealing with a subject that has hair or fur, the Refine Edge feature, which can be found under the Select menu, will help tremendously. When the Refine Edge window pops up, the View dropdown allows you to view your selection in a few different states. I personally prefer the black and white view as it allows me to see the mask detail really well. Under Edge Detection, the Radius slider along with Smart Radius will allow Photoshop to look outside your initial selection for edges that should be included in your selection. This will usually do a great job at grabbing those stray hairs and fur which you normally wouldn't be able to select. Now down under Output, Decontaminate Colors is usually a really good idea to turn on and crank up to 100%. Many times when shooting against a colored background, the color will reflect off the subject's hair and clothes. This option will strip those colors from the edges of your subject. And finally, I always save my result as a new layer with Layer Mask, just in case I need to tweak the mask later on. Pressing OK will show us how powerful the Refine Edge feature really is. It was able to get in between the hairs, which you really wouldn't be able to do with standard selection methods. Now that we have our model extracted, you might notice a few small issues with the mask. Around his ear and shirt, there's slight transparency. This is why I chose to output with a layer mask. I can now click on the layer mask to activate it, grab a white brush, and paint on the areas that I want to correct. Good, now we can move on and add a background. In your Layers panel, create a new layer right below our extracted subject. We're going to add a gradient for this background. In your Tools bar, find your gradient tool. Now, on the options bar at the top, click on the gradient bar, and let's go ahead and set our colors. The color on the far left will be a brownish color. I'm going to use the value 948A79. And the color on the right will be green, 1F352C. Once the colors are set, drag out a gradient from the middle of your subject diagonally upwards. This will add a nice green transition to the top right corner of our image. Now to give our background some texture, let's add a filter. Head up to the Filter menu, down to Sketch, and then choose Water Paper. I'm going to use 25, 55, and 80 for the values. Now just a little side note, you may recognize this type of texture from some of the designs that Apple's been using recently. Pressing OK will apply the texture to our background. Now it's time for the effect. Make sure that your subject's layer is selected by clicking on the image's thumbnail. We don't want the mask selected, so make sure you click on the image's thumbnail. We now want to enter Quick Mask mode. This can be done by either pressing the letter Q on your keyboard or by pressing the Quick Mask button at the bottom of your tools bar. For those who aren't familiar with the Quick Mask tool, it's a tool that allows you to brush in the areas that you either want to select or protect. Using the brush tool, as I paint on the image, a red overlay appears. This tells me which areas will not be selected once the Quick Mask tool is deactivated. For this image, I want to paint a large, soft line right down the middle of his face. This will be the area that will not be affected by the effect. It's very important for effects like this to use a very soft brush. This will allow for a nice transition when we add our filters. Now when I press Q again to deactivate Quick Mask, my selection will be made. Everything that wasn't protected by the overlay is now a selection. It's time to add our filter. Before you start adding filters, it's usually a good idea to convert your layer for smart filters. This will allow you to edit those filters later on if needed. This can be done under the Filter menu at the top. Once the layer has been converted, let's add a motion blur. Head up to Filter, Blur, and then choose Motion Blur. Make sure to set the angle at 0 degrees so you have a horizontal effect. The distance will depend on the size of your image and personal preference. For a subtle result, set a lower value, and for a more extreme result, increase the distance. 100 looks nice for this image. Now one optional step you might want to take to add a bit of grit to the blur would be to duplicate your current layer, Add a noise filter of around 300%. Change the blend mode of that layer to overlay with an opacity of 50%. And that completes it. If you want to check out more Photoshop tutorials, head over to iceflowstudios.com. Take care.